Okay, evening all. James, to see if Will's here. You want to request to join there, Will? If you are in the house. Okay.
Hi,
Hey,
John.
how are we doing?
Yeah, good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, very good, very good.
Good, good.
Good man. How's your day been?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. Working away, keeping busy, but
Good.
yeah, looking forward to a bit of golf over the weekend.
Excellent. Have you played yet since lockdown was sort of lifted on golf?
Yeah, of course. A couple of 9 holes in the evenings. It's been you've got to get out when it's sunny like this, haven't you? 7 weeks not playing golf, you've got to get back out and get the fix again.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of golfers across the country that were sort of counting down and videoing various first tee shots on Wednesday. So certainly nice for everyone to get back out and play. Got quite a few people jumping in now, which is good. Hopefully we'll have a few more as time goes on. For those of you who don't know who Will is, where have you been? Have you been living under a rock? He's pretty big news out on tour with a lot of high-end clients and tour players that he works with out on tour. So Will and I have known each other for quite a few years now with our association with Titleist and Team Titleist particularly, and the fitting work that you do to help train fitters up and down the country, which has been just brilliant. So kind of a brief introduction from me, but I'll hand over the floor to Will to sort of let everyone know a little bit more about yourself, your journey, and sort of how you get to, excuse me, where you are now.
Yeah, so I've been out on tour, looking after the Vokey side of things for about 18 months now.
Yeah.
Before that, when we kind of first met and worked together a little bit, I was doing retail Vokey fitting, so working with weekend golfers, players, moving around all clubs in the UK. Before that, I was doing full line fitting actually for Titleist, so I did a couple of years of that.
Okay, I didn't realise that.
Yeah, so I did 2 years fitting full bag, everything from driver down to wedges. Before that, I think as most golfers do, when you're young, you start playing a bit of golf, you want to get out there and play yourself, get yourself on tour. So I gave it a bit of a crack in the professional side of things. All of a sudden realised how hard it was, how good the players were that you're trying to beat, and decided to go for a different end of the career. So lucky enough now to work with those guys day in, day out, and kind of be there and experience what the experiences are, but not have to try and make a cut on a Friday afternoon, which makes things a lot easier.
I think you're probably underplaying it a little bit there. Will's a very good player himself, so I think you can maybe talk a little bit more to the sort of level you were at. Were you playing like MENA Tour and things like that over in the Middle East? Was that right?
I played Europro, so
Okay.
I played 3 seasons on Europro. Played a lot of mini tour golf in and around that kind of area. I actually was at a sports academy when I was in my late teens down in Colchester, where we got access to some real good coaches. So that was the first time I really saw the high-end side of golf. So I got to do quite a bit of work with Stuart Morgan, who's a performance coach, works with Bernd Wiesberger now.
Yeah, is he over in Austria, Stuart?
I'm not sure if he lives there. He spends a lot of time there with Bernd. I know they've been working together a lot over the last few weeks. Also access to guys like Phil Kenyon, which really opened my eyes to the scientific side of golf. So how these guys are getting better through learning about launch angles and different patterns and how you can improve that side, which is something I'm really trying to bring into that wedge fitting now. I've kind of got a bit more established, get a bit more into the technology side and try and develop things a little bit further.
Yeah, Phil's a great guy. I've done a lot of stuff with him over the years. In fact, his sort of Instagram live sort of motivated me to try and jump up and reach out to yourself and start doing a couple for the guys that I'm networked with. So that's brilliant. I think talking a little bit on the technical side, and obviously in putting, you've got Sam Putt Lab, you've got Capto, you've got a lot of analysis softwares that are taking place and being used there. You know, you look at long game, you've got TrackMan, you've got video analysis, all the rest of it. When you look at short game, it's a little bit harder. You can use TrackMan to a certain degree, and I know GC Quad and things like that, machines that can really get into the nuts and bolts of what's going on with the club's entry in towards the ball, you can really get some good data there. Is that the sort of stuff that you've been looking at, or?
So yeah, I'm more trying to build like a fundamental, the basics around it, the physics side of it. So what makes a good wedge player technique wise and numbers wise. Obviously, when you're fitting players and working with players, it's all field based. Obviously, wedges get used for a lot of different things. So to fit a lob wedge on a launch monitor would be a very tough thing, because all of a sudden you're hitting a 80, 90 yard shot with it, and then the next minute you've got to hit a 10-yard flop shot over a bunker. So you're using different parts of the sole. It's not so much like fitting a driver where you hit the right numbers in the fitting and that's where you're going to get the best performance. With a wedge, it's a case you've got to find something the player likes the look of, they like the feel of, they like the weight of, and the different areas of the sole work for that player in different locations. So whether they're playing a bunker shot, a rough shot, or a shot from a tight fairway, that lob wedge has got to do all of those things. Whereas, say, a 7-iron, you've got a very limited amount of shots you're going to hit with that club.
Yeah, it's plus or minus sort of 5 yards, isn't it, really, with a 7-iron?
That's it,
It could be plus or minus 50 yards with a lob wedge sometimes, the distance that guys hit it out on tour particularly. But yeah, no, it's good. I think just a little bit one for those that have jumped in. We've got 14 viewers now. This is great. Look at that. Guys, those that are watching, feel free to post questions. I'll keep having a little scroll through as we go through this, and try and answer as many of them as we can, or certainly the better ones. Quick one from Hugh Hawkins. So, are there any trends in wedge play that he's noticed over the time he's worked on tour? Yeah, first one. Any trends in wedge play and the time that you've worked on tour?
Yeah, so obviously trends develop in golf. I think a lot of it is the guys playing with each other. So they'll go out and play a practice round with a guy who's got a 6-bounce K grind. And they see this guy hitting a load of good shots, so they want to try it. And then the next week they play with someone else and they're using this new wedge, telling them how great the wedge is, and they want to try it as well. So we had a case of that with a T grind last year. So it was a wedge
I remember you telling me about that. It was people were jumping all over it, right? Because a few good players were using it. Yeah,
so Aaron brought it over for the Open at Carnoustie when it was really, really dry that summer, where everything was baked out, it was brown everywhere. Yeah. And I hung on to him on the truck, and then we went and played a few events where it was really, really dry, really firm. So a few players came on, need a bit of less bounce. It's kind of, well, try this. It's got a really nice profile to it. When you open it up, it sits really square to the ground. I think I bought one up for you to have a go with, actually.
That's right, yeah. I couldn't use it.
No, it's a very specialist one. So, yeah, just trends like that develop. Also, things on the other side. So when we changed to different, like new irons, the new irons come out, the sole's changed a little bit. So from a player who's gone from using one kind of sole in their irons to this new kind of sole, it might change how they like the feel through the pitching wedge, say, or the 9-iron. And then we have to look at the gap wedge side of things, and are we going to marry those two together? So the trend on tour, to be fair, is going more bounce. We're going to more towards where the PGA Tour is and their bounce options.
Yeah.
So they're averaging about 4 to 6 degrees more bounce through the bag than we have.
Yeah.
Obviously, we play a variety of different courses, and I think something we touched on in a phone call earlier, where guys have grown up, especially European players, Australian players, South African players, they used to really tight grass. They used to ball sitting down. So they want to use something with less bounce, because it's probably what they've used all their life from when they're a kid. They've gone in, got fitted, got something really low bounce, and that's what they'll come up with. Now they're getting onto tour, and we're getting to the courses that are being watered a little bit more. The grass types are changing. We're getting out to the Middle East a little bit more. Guys are wanting that extra bit of bounce in the sand wedge, gap wedge especially.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, talking to that, the trends on tour are obviously a big thing. I suppose there's, in the amateur level, you've got people or cases certainly where people hear that a certain shaft is in Rory's driver or in Tiger's driver and whatever. They want to get all over that, and they almost want to be fitted for that driver. But that's, I suppose, human nature, isn't it? To want to use what the best players are using. How do you manage that where maybe, someone comes to you and says, look, I think I need a T grind because that's the trend that everyone's moving towards. But you maybe through testing or through your understanding of that player, and you maybe would advise them possibly not to go down that route. How do you deal with that sort of situation?
I always like to see what the player's doing. A lot of the time we get a player come in and they say, I want to try this. I've seen this. I think I need something with less bounce on it. And it's so easy just to give that player that club and say, yeah, go away and try it yourself.
Yeah.
But the last thing I want to do is give a player that club and they go out on a Sunday afternoon and they're in contention for the tournament and they come to a real pressure shot with that club and it's not the right golf club and they hit a bad shot with it. So every time someone comes and asks for a club now, I'll go out on the chip and green, go out on the range with them, whatever kind of shot they're trying to hit with it, and just make sure that it works first. Generally assess them with their own club. I had a player out in a man, and he's played the same setup of wedges. He came in and asked, and I said, yeah, we'll see, we'll have a look in the morning. So that evening, I looked through what he'd used from when he was an amateur through Challenge Tour and the European Tour, and he used a 46, a 52 with 8 bounce, and an M grind 58. And that was what the set he had in SM8 with his new wedges. So we went out and had a look, and he was like, I just fancy trying something different in the lob wedge. And we went out, ran the par 3 course, and it was a display. It was incredible. He was hitting every shot under the sun. I was putting him in some real tough situations, real tight lies, deep rough, and he was hitting great shots. So it's kind of saying to you, why would you want to change that?
Yeah.
Your short game's great. It's one of the strongest part of your games. Why would you mess around with that? Why would you play with that?
I think that's a big story out on tour, isn't it? Sometimes you're better off, just sticking with what you know. The worst thing you can do is mess them up. Like Butch and Claude, who I have considered, big time mentors of mine over the years. That's one of the things, and I think part of the reason why they've had so much success from a coaching standpoint is that sometimes they just know when to say nothing and to just say, no, you're good as you are. Just keep doing what you're doing. And as a fitter, I'm sure that's the same story as well.
For sure.
Guys at that elite level.
Yeah, in golf, like in other sports like football, rugby, you know when your cup final is. You've got a week to prepare for it. In golf, you could turn up any week and that week could be your Sunday where you're going down the back nine with a one-shot lead.
Yeah.
So we need to make sure the guys are completely prepared for every week and every tournament and they've got everything in the bag they need. For a Premiership footballer, they're probably not going to change the boots to play in the FA Cup final. They'll probably stick with the pair they've worn and they know what they do.
Yeah.
So we could get a guy in a situation where, like I say, he's going down the back nine of the tournament. We don't want anything new in his bag. We want him to have played that for a while and know exactly what it does.
Yeah.
So it's just that familiarity 100%. As well.
100%. I think we've sort of answered Hugh's question. I'll follow up on his second one there. So, second question: does some grinds come in and out of fashion? So we've kind of dealt with that with the players with that T grind. Any others that you find are reasonably popular as well as that T grind, or any other trends?
We've had a little trend of S grinds back end of this season. Maybe guys moving to an S grind in the lob wedge. So an S grind is a more full sole. There's no heel relief on it, so it gives you a little bit more help on there. I think guys have changed the technique a little bit. Coaching patterns change, and people start to see these numbers, and coaches start to work with these numbers. And when those techniques evolve a little bit with the players, they want to change into something else. So something like if you go from an L grind, say, to an S grind, it's going to allow you to use the sole a little bit more. You can be a bit more aggressive into the turf. You can get quite shallow through it as well. So I think as the trends in coaching change, the trends in the wedges change as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, certainly touching on that point of trends, I can certainly remember, and it's been, I suppose, talked about into the ground now about, the whole leaning the shaft forwards, de-lofting the club. And that was very much the old school way of teaching people how to chip, and a lot of people have maybe been hurt by some of that advice. And you've seen probably last decade into the early parts of the sort of 2011, 2012, people still coming around to the idea of using the bounce and being a little bit shallower. But it's not all about being shallow, as I'm sure you can attest to. Sometimes you need to be a little bit steep, right? It's not like shallow is always best for all situations. It's very much horses for courses. Maybe you can talk a little bit to that point. Yeah,
so I think having a good basic understanding of having a standard chip shot, so knowing how you hit that shot, having checkpoints when you practice to recreate that shot, and then knowing your variations. So whether it's a case of moving ball position around, I know with James Ridyard, who we spoke about earlier, he's big into kind of having your standard shot and then moving away and around from there to hit the specialist shots.
100%.
So there's that kind of standard technique where you're using the bounce, and then if you do move the ball back, then you've got to know that it's going to dig in a little bit more. You're taking bounce off it, you're making the leading edge sharper. So you're adding that element of risk to it, which is kind of the old school chipping method, where you're falsely making it steeper. Then you're just taking all the bounce out of it, taking all the forgiveness out of the club. And then you can move it forward, which is going to give you a little bit more height. You're also adding bounce to it as well. moving handle positions around to affect the bounce and the loft on the club. The standard chip shot is the guys that you see, the shot that you see a lot of the guys on tour practice the majority of the time. And then you'll see him throw a few different balls around the green, different locations, just practice those specialist shots. So I think especially for amateurs, get that core standard chip shot nailed, and then you can start moving around and playing around in the different locations and practicing your touch and field shots.
Yeah, I think talking a little bit to James's stuff, I've been fortunate to learn a lot from him over the last couple of weeks, and always wanted to pick his brains in the past, but never quite got the opportunity to attend one of his seminars. So it's been great to learn from him, and I know he's very keen, like you say, to kind of change as much as you can at setup, rather than trying to change it in swing. If you've kind of got that baseline technique and you've got that sort of middle shot that you're reasonably happy with, try and make as much of the adjustment to the ball flight, whether you want it slightly lower or slightly higher at setup, because then it means your hands don't have to do quite as much to change the dynamics of it during the swing, which is a really cool way to think about it for me.
If you ever talk to Bob about short game, he always says Seve is his man on a short game. So one of the best short game players ever. And I watched quite a few videos on Seve over the last few weeks, and he's done those one. It almost looks like a home video that's been recorded. It's brilliant. And when he's talking about hitting these different shots, he talks about setup for like 5 minutes, and then when he gets to actually hitting the shot, he says just feel like your hand does this. Yeah. So, like you say, it's all based around setup. Even back to the kind of days of Seve, they realised that you get all the work done in the setup, and then it's just a case of putting a smooth swing on it.
Yeah, brilliant. And you mentioned Bob there. What's it like to spend time around him? I know he thinks very highly of you. When I introduce you to people, I often call you the European Bob Vokey. I'm not sure if that's fair, because you're your own man. But
I think you're flattering me a little bit there, John.
What's it been like sort of learning from him, and indeed, wider than that, with your job that you've got with Titleist and their kind of forward-thinking approach to wedge game and development? So
the first time I met Bob was during the SM6 launch at the sales meeting. We went out to Portugal, so they introduced SM6. I was one of the fitting reps then, and we introduced SM6 to the sales reps. So we got to play with it around the par 3 course, hit shots with it. Bob was there to kind of give us all the talk and the CG location, because it was the first time we'd had the altered CG and a wedge, so it was a real exciting time for the wedge thing. And from spending 2 or 3 days with him there, it's kind of like, this guy's like inspirational. He's bought the Vokey brand, obviously made it up himself. It was a case of they were sitting around a table, sort of in the 90s, and Bob back then used to design drivers. And now it's developed on, they were sitting around and said, right, we need to get into these wedge things. Guys are starting to go into specialist wedges, so we need to get into that market. Anyone fancy doing it? So Bob sticked his hand up, one of the driver designers, and said, yeah, I'll give it a crack. And from there, built up what Vokey is today. Wow. So just hearing stories like that about him, and how, like, we're on the range. We're in at Victoria in Portugal, and we were all there first thing in the morning, first light, setting up the range, ready for the reps to come out. I think it was one of the media days, and not expecting to see Bob until the first media guy turned up, and he came jogging down the ramp at Victoria at sort of 7 o'clock in the morning, ready to get going. It was just us guys down there. And he must have spent an hour with us, just the fitting reps, just explaining different things and fitting different guys for different clubs. And I was kind of thinking, if you're that excited about golf clubs and you've done it for all your life, and you're that excited about wedges, a great part of the business to be in, a great company to work for as well. So from that, I wanted to get into the Vokey side of things a bit more. And obviously now being in it for a couple of years and getting to spend time with Aaron, who's the PGA Tour rep. Yeah,
I think he sent you a test question. Hey, Aaron.
Brilliant. Cheers.
Test question logged in here, so that would be quite interesting. I'll ask you that one in a sec.
Perfect. Yeah, so spending time with Aaron as well, and we have a few calls just to catch up, and just learning things from him about the grinding and like player feedback and interaction with players. It's really good. It's good to work for a company that doesn't just always look forward. So with the development of things like SM6, SM7, SM8, they look back at the old grinds and the shapes that players preferred in previous generations, like 200 series, the SM4s. And it's a case of mashing all the things together to produce the best wedge every time it comes out. Yeah. So it's
in terms of that, would you say, talking through the SM4 series up kind of onwards, would you say, how would you describe that transition to people in terms of where the CG has moved, and have we actually gone back to maybe some other wedge grinds and some other, let's say, construction styles that actually worked really well in the past? Has there been anything like that, or?
So obviously, when the SM line started, it was the first time we started spin milling grooves into the wedges. Before that, there were press grooves, which really improves your spin rate, increases forgiveness into the green, improves performance in the rough. So the SM line is a big jump forward in groove technology. But moving from SM4, SM5 into SM6, SM6 is when we started manipulating the CG location.
Okay.
So started moving the CG location slightly higher in the more lofty clubs and slightly lower in the less lofty clubs.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Helps performance, helps distance on those less lofty clubs. Guys were struggling to hit the 46 in the SM5 far enough to match him with an iron set. So it's just helped that side of things. Progressing on to SM7, similar CG story, but just really honed them in and tightened it up so they were exactly where they needed to be. The big progression onto SM8 is moving that CG location forward.
Yeah.
So what we found with the older generation of wedges before the CG change was very accurate, like SM4 kind of wedges where the CG was slightly further forward. They're really accurate, but not very forgiving, whereas SM7 was really forgiving. So combining those two wedges, moving that CG high, like SM7, and forward into SM8, the players that I've worked with and the players I've fitted into them during the launch, everyone just says it's easier to use. It's easier to hit the target with. It's easier to put a straight spin on there.
Brilliant.
Easier to flight as well. So for amateurs, it's going to make things a lot easier. Everyone's trying to hit that Tour Pro flight with the wedges, with a lob wedge.
Yeah.
And SM8 just helps you push that forward and hit it lower.
Yeah, brilliant. And that's, I personally, I'm not talking from experience because I only did that very quick fitting day with yourself back in February now, which seems like a lifetime ago, where we were sort of getting all trained up on how to fit with the SM8 wedges. And obviously then we went into lockdown. But to that point about kind of that flighted wedge trajectory, I know we both have learned a little bit from Stephen Orr over the last few months. And Stephen had done a lot of research with Dr. Rob Neal and others over in the States, looking at a lot of tour players. In fact, Lane, who's, I think he's based at, is it works with Mark Blackburn. I think he does a little bit of that. I'm not sure exactly where Lane's based, but those guys as a group had kind of done quite a big research project into, what kind of windows trajectory-wise are tour players hitting. Is that right?
That's right, yeah.
You can maybe mention to the guys watching, what data you've found and what's been useful in that area.
Yeah, so talking to guys like Stephen is really interesting because whereas we're all focused on performance of the players and the guys hitting it closer and striking it better, they're looking into what makes the best wedge players and what the best wedge players are doing, and they kind of quantify that into numbers. So you're looking for a dynamic loft of, this is for a pitch shot, say 80 yards. So you're looking for a dynamic loft of 40, a launch angle of 30, attack angle of about 5 or 6 down, and some real good ways to do that. I know James Ridyard talks about having a launch gate. So you almost set up like a football goal. There's a really good formula for how you make it and how high you hit it.
Yeah, there's an app actually you can download. There's a trigonometry app for anyone who is interested in that. So you can figure out how high you need to have your sort of gate. So you're back to your maths GCSE to figure that out.
You can spend hours trying to hit it under that bar.
Or you can just Google launch windows with James Ridyard, and he'll give you that.
So things like that for amateurs are a great way to practice, even for tour players. It's a real good way to see how high you're hitting it and where you're flighting it in relation to a tour player. Yeah. I know the first time I set it up and hit a few shots, I hit it was way over the bar. It was shocking. It was in Rosette, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
One really interesting thing I did with Stephen is we went down to Woburn and just hit a few shots. We were just going through the grinds. Obviously, he's done a lot of research on the launch of things. So we wanted to see what effect that had on bounce. So we were hitting different shots to this flag, and there's a tree overhanging, and we're changing through different clubs. And he was hitting L grind and M grind, he was catching the top of the tree. Switched him into a D grind. All of a sudden, the ball's coming out a lot flatter, a lot lower. Obviously, the strike location has moved down because there's extra bounce on it, so the ball's coming off a little bit lower, a little bit less energy transfer on there as well, which is going to increase your spin.
Yeah.
He was amazed that you could do that much with bounce. Obviously, you can control a lot with the angle of your hands and your forward shaft lean and rotation into the ball, but actually being able to do it with the golf club. And for a guy who's struggling to do it, you can change golf club and it does it for you. Yeah. So how much easier is that going to make it?
Exactly. I mean, the old adage of, when I'm fitting really good players, they generally already have quite a lot of that shaft lean sort of instilled in their distance wedge action. So, you mentioned about sort of de-lofting the club that they're playing by about 15 degrees. If that's possible with the sort of sequence and the kind of move that the player makes, then great. But if you've got, a very high handicapper who, has that typical kind of club head throwaway, throw the hands a little bit, it's going to be a lot more difficult to get the dynamic loft that you require. So I'm forever, when I'm doing fittings, actually telling people, I don't think you need to be hitting full distance wedge shots with your 60 degree. Let's get down to using that 56 or maybe even that 52 or 54 so that we can get the kind of dynamic loft that we actually need for this shot. And sort of recommend, if you still want a 60, then that's fine, but we're probably going to keep to using that around the greens and bunkers rather than for distance wedge shots. I think that's oftentimes a lot more consistent for your higher handicapper, sort of less skilled player, until they learn at least to do some of that de-lofting type impact positions. So
so I talk to a lot of amateurs about how your bag's set up. So a lot of guys worry that they're going to play different golf courses. So say they're a player who's got a membership at a Parkland and a links course. So they're kind of thinking, I need two sets of wedges because I need low bounce wedges for the links and I need high bounce wedges for the Parkland.
Yeah,
it's not the case. It's the same with the pitching thing. Like you say, have a 60 that's great around the green. End of the day, it's a specialist club. It's for hitting those touch shots, the soft shots, for getting a bit more spin on the ball. Whereas your sand wedge is going to be something you need a bit more bounce on. It's called a sand wedge for a reason. You use it out of sand, you use it for pitching. If you've got a club that when you get outside 30 yards, you switch to your sand wedge and that works all the way up to 100 yards, say, you can have something a bit more bounce on that's going to give you the extra forgiveness out of the rough and the fairway. So you haven't got to worry about hitting the 60 that's really designed to be played around the green. You'll probably be fitted to hit it around the green. Guys, a lot of the time will grab the 60 out of the bag. Whereas they should actually be grabbing the 56, 54 out just to make it easier for themselves.
Exactly.
I think one thing I'd say to guys, if you're going to go and watch a tour event, hopefully when they open the doors again, just spend a bit of time watching them hit pitches. So generally they hit a few pitches when they're warming up and just watch the flight of it when they're hitting 50-yard pitch shots.
Yeah.
Just see how low it is.
It is a lot lower than people expect, isn't it?
That's it. And I think a lot of the time people think they've almost thinned it because it's quite a click and quite a heavy strike on the ball. It's not like a flush iron strike.
Exactly.
And when you watch him hit a few longer pitch shots from the fairway as well, it's that same strike. It's clipping the ball off the top.
Yeah.
And from our side of things, when we're fitting players, that's what you're looking for. You can help them achieve that by bounce. So no matter how they deliver it, to an extent, you can create that strike by giving someone the right bounce and loft on a club.
Yeah, love it, brilliant. I think we're getting some good gold out of you this evening. This is brilliant. I'm just going to flick through here and check some questions that are coming in. I've got some listed down here as well, but don't want to be rude to those guys that have joined us. So we'll ask you the one from Aaron Dill. What grinds work best on the UK tour versus the US tour?
Okay, that's one we've discussed, to be fair. So like I said before, US tour, they tend to use a little bit more bounce. It's very varied still. So you do get guys playing very low bounce over there, and that generally marries into their technique and how they like to play shots and what club they're going to select for each shot. Over on the UK tour and the European tour, because we're playing so many different conditions, we have a few guys that even carry two lob wedges. So when you get a firm week, we'll take Rummy, for example.
Yeah.
So Rummy carries basically a wide sole and a narrow sole. So he carries an AD grind, which is an L grind with a sole completely shaved and flattened off. So it plays very low bounce. So when it's really tight, he'll use that around the green.
Yeah.
Obviously, phenomenal wedge player, phenomenal bunker player. And he's also got a K grind, which is the real wide sole club. And he's playing that down
and
at
are these
3.
in the same loft or are these different lofts?
Yeah, they're both at 61.
Okay.
Yeah. So he's got a really interesting wedge setup. And he likes a bit of a gooseneck, so he likes it old school looking.
Yeah.
61 degrees aloft, and like I say, he likes a very flat sole on there. He likes to be able to manipulate it and move it around quite a lot. So he carries a narrow and the wide sole. So when it gets a little bit softer or it gets a bit fluffier sand in the bunkers, he plays the wide sole. I spent a bit of time with him out in Belgium. He was hitting both clubs side by side in the bunker and like flying in different distances and hitting these different flights with them. Trying to decide which one he was going to put in the bag for the week and which one was going to suit that golf course the best. Obviously, just to answer Aaron's questions a little bit more, it all depends on the player's technique. We have got tendencies. So the majority of players on European Tour play M grind, which is quite closely followed by the low bounce K. T grind's well up there as well. Whereas on PGA Tour, they'll tend to go for something. Hard lines are quite big on the PGA Tour, so things like your M grind, your L grind. They've got a few V grinds in play as well over there. So they tend to use a bit more pre-wear as well, because obviously the grass type's a little bit different. It's a little bit softer, it's a little bit more grainy, so they need something to keep the club out of the ground.
Yeah.
Whereas on the European Tour, the guys are trying to almost get the club into the ground because it's so firm.
Yeah, yeah, good. Hopefully that's answered Aaron's question.
I'm sure I'll find out if it hasn't.
I like that. I'm going to be using that in fittings when we get back to it.
Yeah.
Here's one from Freddie. So Freddie, who used to work for us at JCB. Good evening, mate. Hi guys, where did the idea of varying the length of the hosel to manipulate the ball flight come from in the SMA?
Some very, very clever people. So there's a guy called Kevin Tesistro who works on the design of the wedges and works on the CG locations. They use CAD design to design these positions. And from speaking to Aaron and Bob, a lot of it came from Aaron's feedback from the players. So they were finding in some of the options, and some of the players were finding the lob wedge was flying a little bit too high.
Yeah.
Obviously, when you move the weight up in a golf club on the face, it's going to want to add a bit more loft to it. So to counteract that, what you do is move the CG forward. So the most forward part of a golf club when you're hitting the ball, if you think with a bit of shaft lean, is the hosel.
Yeah.
So if you add more weight to the hosel, it's going to push the CG forward. But what that's also going to do, though, is drag the weight into the heel. So to counteract that, you put tungsten in the toe of the golf club, so multi-material design. It's going to move that weight more towards the toe of the golf club. So you get a multi-material design, you've got the longer hosel, and you've got the CG location actually outside the front of the face, which is going to give you that lower ball flight, increased spin, increased forgiveness, which is a big one on there as well.
Yeah, I think if Freddie, if you Google some of the images of the prototype SM8 wedge, that'll probably be quite useful for him to have a look at, because it really visually explains how and why you've been able to move that CG forward. And so Freddie's working up at Archerfield now.
Okay.
Hopefully going to be doing some fittings in the next couple of years. So Freddie, hopefully that'll give you a bit of insight there. Maybe have a little look at the SM8 prototype wedge, because that'll give you a little bit more understanding of it as well. And I got a chance to actually hit it on that fitting day, and it's weird to hit, but it explains it really nicely.
Yeah. So what that is so imagine the face. There's a ball bearing in the heel, a ball bearing in the toe. So the first idea was, right, we need to move the CG forward. So let's put more weight in front of the face. And then the tough bit from there is, right, we've got something that performs well, but how are we going to make that actually look like a golf club? Because I don't know about you, but that one with the ball bearings on, hit it out of the ball bearing more time than hit it out of the face. So moving that CG inside the head and the technology inside the head is the tough part with that. So I think you'd agree now, in SM8, we've got something that looks like a real classic wedge, but is industry leading in design and technology.
Yeah, it is beautiful. I've got one here for everyone to have a little look at.
Perfect.
Loaded. That's a 5608 M grind, which is very nice.
Very nice.
But yeah, very clean, very classic. Love it. This isn't a promo or a plug really for Titleist, or it wasn't intended to be, but no, that's great. There's some good stuff there. So we'll jump into some of the questions that I've got from people sort of in preparation for tonight. So this is from Lugo. Oh, how do I say that? Lugo Vista. Do you use the bounce, or let's say players that you have worked with, do they use the bounce all the time, or do you try to chip with a closed face sometimes? So I think by closed face, he probably means sort of de-lofted. We've sort of covered it a little bit. I'll let you answer it first, and then I'll maybe give my two pennies worth.
There's some really interesting stuff with that. So I like to talk to a lot of the coaches and the players about how they play these shots. So I tend to hang around on the chipping green and just say to guys like, so how are you playing that shot? What are you thinking when you're playing that shot? Which part of the club are you using? Yeah. That all helps when you come to work with them in the future. If you have a better understanding of the short game on which part of the clubs they use, you can find a better wedge for them. So some guys like to use a toe. So they'll sit it, lob wedge, hands up, toe down on the ground. Helps you cut through, especially when it's grainy or you get into some really thick rough. It's a real easy way to play. It's kind of a safe shot. Mm-hmm. Other players like to use the heel a little bit more. Some guys lean it forward. What I'd say is, when you get fitted for your wedges, you'll get fitted for something that works in all situations. So like we did at JCB, you try it in all different locations and pick the best one out of the bunch that you can 100%. Work the best in the most areas. From there, because that's your like middle ground, you can work either way. You can add bounce to it, or you can take bounce off, and it'll still stay relatively forgiving. If you go for something that's got too little bounce and then try and take bounce off it by moving the ball back or turning the face in and closing the face, it's going to become quite hard to use. So if you get fitted first for that middle ground wedge, then you can manipulate the face and hit those different shots. So I'd say, yeah, if you want to take bounce off it, if you've got a real deadpan lie, or you get on a bit of grass where it's firm, well, where there's no grass and it's firm, close the face down and take bounce off, and so you can make sure you strike it. The majority of the tour players I work with use the bounce. They're really good at it. They know how to bottom the club out. They practice a lot. They use the bounce on all different surfaces as well. It's kind of my job and Aaron's job as well to allow them to use the bounce. So giving them a golf club that's going to let them release underneath it and hit the shots they need to hit in different conditions.
Yeah, I think for the amateur level of golfer, it's definitely important to know what your intention is. I think you probably agree. The guys out on tour always know kind of how the club is going to interact with the ground, or at least they should. They're pretty confident with their chipping, right? So they've got an amazing ability to use their hands and the way that they set up to shots to kind of know how the club is going to interact. I think, I'm not sure where I heard this, but certainly the idea of the club is that the club is intended or is designed to hit the ground, not the ball, really.
That's it, yeah.
And sort of knowing how it's going to interact with that ground that you're hitting from is going to be critical, really, to how confident you are over the shot and the kind of, I suppose, the confidence that you enter it with, and the kind of, I suppose, ownership, the posture, the way that you walk into it, and that sense of self-belief that you're going to perform what you want to do. Even if that means sometimes you're taking a divot as well. You know, if your intention is to take a divot, then that's okay in certain situations. Maybe when the ball is sitting down a little bit in a nasty little lie and you want to ensure that the club gets low enough to hit the ball. You know, in situations like that, that's okay to use a little bit of a diggy type approach, but you've got to know that that's what you're about to do. You know what I mean? Yeah.
So
that's what I find anyway.
Yeah, for guys who have played golf all their life and they played from juniors, do you think when you're a junior chipping around the green or out on the golf course late at night with all your mates or the other juniors having a chipping competition, you don't think about the divot, you don't think about how the club's bottoming out, you just hit the best shot that you can in that situation. So you're going to throw each other behind bushes and in bunkers and plug lies, and you don't even think about it. You just set up. They might put a plug lie, so you stick the ball way behind your back foot and then dig down into it and generally hit a good shot. I think a lot of guys get too wrapped up in trying to hit that perfect technique every time from every lie. You've got to be versatile. You've got to be able to play those different shots. I think that springs out when you look at the amount of wedges we've got in the lob wedge. You get 5 different options in the 60 degree. You get out onto tour, and obviously with the grinding and the extra options we have out there, there's countless options. There's almost unlimited options to what you can do.
So that was one of my questions, actually. So we've got 6 kind of wedges, I think, that are available to most consumers, or 6 different grinds rather. How many are there on tour? Is it endless? How many different wedges are there available to
So Aaron over in the States, obviously, because he's been on tour a lot longer than I have, he kind of uses the back catalogue of grinds and the things that they've used in the past, and he can kind of call upon those. The ones we've got in SM8 at the moment, we have a couple of different K grinds. So K grind is very useful. The wide sole is very forgiving out of sand. It's very versatile as well out of sand. So we've got different bounce options in that. We've also got just basically what it is. If we get a grind on tour, so say an L grind with the sole shaved off becomes really popular. So that came out on Wedgeworks as an AD grind a few years ago, sold out straight away, really, really good. And now we've got a very similar wedge as an A grind, which is a tour option. So the grinds have all come from ones that have been used on tour, manipulated on tour, changed in a certain way, and then when they've become so popular, they'll move on to the retail side. So every grind that you've got in retail is something that's been evolved from tour. For instance, players wanted an M grind with more bounce on, which is what you see in a D grind now. It's all developed from tour for tour players and then brought into the consumer market.
Verified, as Bob likes to always check in with his guys, isn't he? He's always checking in with,
That's it.
We spoke about Brett Rumford. He's one of his guys that he goes to and says, "What do you think to this wedge?" and kind of tour validated is kind of the way that they like to do things. I know Scotty Cameron and he has his guys that he calls upon as well. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. So obviously tour validated. It kind of, you see it banded around a lot, but I think what it actually means, and talking to Bob about it, is it'll send it to players. It'll be guys that have played on tour 20 years ago. It's just guys he trusts, guys who know shape, guys who know feel and know what they do with the golf club and what they want it to do. So I know when SM8 came out, he sent it around to a lot of the players that he trusted and that have used Vokey for a lot of years and said, what do you think? The last thing you want to do when you bring out a new Vokey is completely change the brand. People play Vokey because they like it and they like the feel of it. Yeah. So tour validation isn't a case of having only the best players in the world, but it's having those and then backed up by the players who've got the most knowledge and that have played the clubs for the longest. So it's keeping the continuous Vokey theme going through, but then also getting that input of the best players in the world at the current time.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Okay, jumping in with a couple more questions here from the guys with us this evening. So this is from Matthew Asim. Do any pros build up the bottom hand on their wedges more?
Yeah, we have a few guys do that actually. There's a guy, we've got a guy who has, so if you imagine the steps on the shaft, he has one layer of tape. So you measure down to where the bottom of the grip is, draw a line with a marker pen, and then you do one layer of tape to the first step, then another layer of tape over that to the second step, and then a couple of layers over the top, which basically makes it a parallel grip. Mm-hmm. So guys, he likes to, and he does it in his lob wedge, and he likes to do it so when he grips further down the club, it feels the same thickness all the way down. Yeah. We have a couple of other guys who do it, especially guys in their irons. It's quite interesting the gripping that guys have on wedges. We've got a couple of players. George Coetzee's one, where on his lob wedge, all he has is a bit of starter tape, so the grip's literally just on the shaft. So it feels really, really thin. So he just gets the vibration of the shaft and he can feel the club a little bit more. Yeah. And then you go to the other extreme where you've got guys playing a standard grip with 5 layers of tape under it. So it's really, really thick. Yeah. It really bounces around, and you can do a lot with feel with grips. I think people change grip too quickly. So you go into a pro shop, say, all right, what grip am I going to put on my clubs? And they'll just pick out the most colourful one, or the one that looks cool, or the one they've seen in a magazine. Yeah. Whereas, to be honest, what you want to be doing is know what your grip weight is. So if you're playing a grip that weighs 6 or 53 grams, say, and you go and put something on that's 57 grams, it's going to change the feel of the club. Yeah. The reason the club's
and things like that.
That's it. The reason the club's in your bag is because you like the feel of it. Let's keep that feel. So make sure you're putting something on that's pretty similar. Yeah. So it's all about keeping that balance in there.
Yeah, I think to that point, I know for Matthew there, that the Golf Pride +4 grip kind of takes care of that for you. If it is something that you find that you like, that right hand to have a little bit more substance when you're gripping it with that bottom hand, then the Golf Pride +4. I know that's been quite a popular grip for consumers recently. Maybe because they see people out on tour having this sort of tapering type effect of the way that people get the packing tape underneath the grip. Maybe that's a reason why Golf Pride have done very well with that +4 grip.
Yeah, 100%. At the end of the day, it's all the feel, isn't it? Like with all wedge players, all feel. So if you got something that feels better for you and it's going to make you play better, use it for sure.
Yeah, it couldn't be more true for wedges, though, particularly because it's so much about that subjective opinion. I think, and that's the art and the creativity for yourself as a fitter, and that interaction with the player to keep asking them the right questions and interacting with them to just get that little feel that gives them the wedge that they want. So another one here from Alex, I'm Glass Golf. Will there be more grind options in the gap and pitching wedges in future editions? So more grind options in the gap and pitching wedge. So
with the gap and pitching wedge, because that's more of a full shot club, we like to stick it to something that's fairly close to the iron soles. The problem is if you start playing around with that, it's like asking the question, are you going to have different sole options in your irons? So the pitching wedge and gap wedge, obviously the gap wedge, you've got 2 different options in there. The pitching wedge is only one option. We found with the pitching wedge sole, I've never had to do any work on one for a player on tour. It works for all the guys out there. I think it's a case, obviously, over the many years of Vokey, there's narrowing it down into which one works the most consistently and which one matches up to the most iron sets. And that's what they've found with the 10 bounce and the 46 and 48. Mm-hmm. When you move into the 50-52, that's when we're going to start hitting partial shots and start wanting to deliver it different ways, whether you want to hit a higher shot, a softer shot. People start using the 50-52 as a chipping club, a pitching club, so that's why we have more options. So if you actually look at the lineup of wedges, you start off with one option in the pitching wedges, two options in the gap wedges, 3 or 4 in the sand wedges. And then when you move into the lob wedges, you're going down to the 4 or 5 again.
Yeah.
So it's the more different shots you have to hit with the club, the more different options you get with the grind.
Yeah. I think sometimes, when this, certainly on the website, there was all this excitement about the grinds. And it shouldn't be lost that the actual bounce angle number is just as important really as the letter of the grind, right? So still in 50 degree and 52, you've still got a couple of options with bounce angle, but not necessarily grind yet. But always watch this space, I suppose. Aaron and,
if you look at a gap wedge, so if you actually look at what the grind's for, if you put trailing edge relief on a golf club, that's so you can release it underneath the ball when you're hitting a pitch chip shot, so you can hit it a little bit higher. If you put heel relief on a golf club, that's so you can open the face up and hit a flop shot, lob shot.
Yeah.
How many lob shot, flop shots are you going to hit with a gap wedge?
You're not going to. Some rare situations where you try and hit flop shots with 50 degrees. Maybe if you're doing a clinic and you want to,
that's it.
Fun, but see John Rahm a few years ago hitting flop shots with a 4-iron in the open zone, wasn't it? But,
not something to try in the garden during lockdown.
Yeah,
definitely
I think
not.
if you're using your wedge correctly, and if you've got a nice understanding of how to use your 60 degree, you don't have to play flop shots that often. So the different grind and bounce options at that top end of the bag are probably where they're most important. But you never know. Watch this space. Maybe there'll be something that comes in for you, Alex, in the future.
Who knows?
James Howard. Evening, James.
Brilliant. What's this going to be?
Evening, lads. So how big an impact does player feedback have these days on wedge design, especially with people having such varying tendencies and preferences? Where did you get that question from, James?
That's a very intellectual one. So player feedback is our number one. I had a call with Aaron just the other day, and we were talking about different profile shapes that guys prefer, European side to PGA Tour side. Obviously, when you're setting a wedge down on different kinds of grass, you want it to look a slightly different way. So one of my first things when I get back is I'm going to make up a few wedges with different profiles, different soles, and just get my players to have a little look at them on European Tour and see which ones they prefer. Send the feedback to Aaron, and then they can look through that and gain feedback from. There's a Vokey wedge rep in Japan as well. And obviously we've got reps in Australia, South Africa. So now we've extended the Vokey network with more fitters, then it allows the guys in America to get more feedback from different parts of the world.
Brilliant.
It is all player driven. So everything we get, every bit of feedback that Aaron gets, it's not necessarily us standing there going, well, I've seen this. It'll be what a player's said to us and what a player's experiencing. Or a lot of the time guys will say, I'm seeing this, come out and have a look at it for me. They might be hitting it too high, hitting it too low, or they're hitting a funny shot every now and again, and they're just wondering what it is. Is it them? Is it the club? So all the work we do is based around player feedback. Consumer feedback's a great one as well. So any guys that come in on team tight list or go through the testing process when we have the new clubs, a lot of that is put into the wedges. We want to know what people think. End of the day, golfers are using the wedges, so they've got to be made for the golfer as well.
Yeah, 100%. Good question, James. Very professional of you. So I'll try and get us through as many of these as I can, because I've been watching a lot of Instagram lives, and it's always frustrating when your question doesn't get answered, right? So, Matt, what bounce and grinds is Will using at the moment?
So at the minute, I've got a 46 Vokey. I've got 50 12 bounce. I've got a 54 14, and then I've got a 58 A grind. So I like a lot of flat soles on there. A bit of extra bounce in the pitching wedge, in the sand wedge to help those pitching shots, like I was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
I'm one that tends to fly it a little bit higher, so as soon as I put more bounce on it, it helps me drive it a little bit lower into the green.
Okay.
And the 46 Vokey is a real good one. So I've played around with it a lot and kind of tested it against the set pitching wedge. And it's one that amateurs miss out on. It's a real good way to get some extra forgiveness.
Yeah.
So like, how many times do guys hit a pitching wedge out of heavy rough and you get either fly it or the ball pitches on the green and runs through the back of the green?
Yeah, big time.
So if you think you've got press grooves on your irons, and they're iron grooves basically, if you switch that out for a spin mill groove, and it's got the parallel face texture in between the grooves, so you're getting wedge spin on there as well, it stops a lot quicker on the green. It flies a little bit lower, it's more controlled, and it's something that's really helped me in my game. Yeah. So being able to have a wedge control from sort of about 135 yards and in is great. It really helps that launch and keeping things in the right windows.
And that's something that was definitely noticeable for me when I first started getting to know you. You know, I'd done quite a lot of fittings of wedges and irons previously, but I would have probably lent more towards, particularly with the high handicap player, fitting them into the pitching wedge in the set, rather than looking at that 46 degree Vokey. Whereas when I first started getting to know you and doing a bit of training with yourself, that was something that really I took from those sessions as you know, an avenue to explore a little bit more, particularly even with higher handicap players as well. So yeah, that's a good point.
Definitely. Yeah.
Another one from Aaron. This is good. What is the most common customization request you get on tour?
So a lot of guys like a heel relief on there. We tend to do that. It'll be on like a K grind. So if you've got a guy who's played a K grind for a while, they might be struggling to get the face open and get the club sit as tight as they like to the floor. We do a lot of that. Sometimes guys want it adding a bit extra. Say they play an M grind and they just want it smooth enough a little bit in the heel just to sit a bit tighter when they open the face. Another real common one is the hard line in the sole. So what the hard line is if you think on an L grind, M grind, D grind, is that ridge that you have sitting in the middle of the sole. So a lot of players like that flattened off slightly. And when I say slightly, I mean just a touch, just take the top off it. Almost like they've played it for a year and it's kind of smoothed off a little bit. Yeah. So we do that quite a bit. And it goes down to the extent if you got guys like JB Hansen's a good one. He just has it completely smoothed off. So he likes it to sit really flat to the floor and he can manipulate that round a little bit. It's quite interesting to see what different players like. Some players like the look of older wedges, so you have to do things like square off the leading edge. If you look online, it's really interesting. If you go on the Vokey website, on the Vokey hand ground program, it gives you, there's about 6 different options that you can have customized to your own wedge. Yeah. And they're kind of the most prominent ones that we see on tour. So things like profile shaping, trailing edge relief or leading edge shaping. So there's a lot of different options.
You can build your own wedge on there, can't you? I had a little play with that when I was speaking to the Team Tightness guys prior to lockdown, and it's an amazing site actually. You can get into a lot of the options that tour players get as well.
That's it. Yeah,
you can even see the picture of it as well, can't you? With customization of names, lettering, and all the rest of it.
Exactly that. Yeah. So it's there's nothing kind of set in stone, but we keep measurements for all the tour players and like real exact measurements. And whenever we're making wedges or making a new set for them, say in the workshop back in St Ives, we send them out and they'll match up exactly to what they're playing at the moment. So it's a case of Aaron's got guys in the US, we've got guys over here, and they come and play different tours. Mm-hmm. So what we do, we've got a platform where we can share photos. So if I'm building a wedge for, say, Rafa, you have a look at a photo of the last one Aaron made for him, and we can make sure we're getting them absolutely spot on. So a guy like Rafa, he has those hard lines taken out, but he uses a chrome wedge. So it affects the chrome a little bit. So what you have to do for Rafa is really buff it really, really flat. So you get on the buffing wheel. First thing he does is put his thumb on top of it and then runs his thumb across the sole. And if he feels any little ridge in it, you have to straight back in.
He's got his own little test.
That's it, yeah, the Rafa test.
Class.
So yeah, so it's always a good one if you pass the Rafa test first time.
Yeah. So before we're coming up close to our hour where we'll get kicked off. So there's a few more in here, but I've got one I want to ask and kind of maybe finish towards these kind of more light-hearted parts. Best stories from out on tour. Tell us a couple of really cool stories or moments that you've had around the chipping green with guys on tour, whether they're funny stories, things that people out there might not have known about before. So
Rummy's always a good one. It was actually that time I went to spend with him when we were out in Belgium. So I walked around the side of the green, kind of how's it going? Yeah, what do you think to your hotel? All that, the usual chat you have. Yeah. And he's hitting this flop shot over a bunker from a tight lie onto a downslope, and there's a flag about 5 yards on the green. And he's hitting a couple, and I think he's on it today. This is looking good. And then he hit one. He said, "Watch this," and it pitched, and then rolled and just missed a hole on the right. And then he hit another one, and it must have landed 2 inches left of the first one, and it missed left. It's like, you can't hold it. It's impossible. It's an unholdable shot. And I was standing there thinking, I'd just be happy to hit the green for me, to be honest. And he's hitting these flop shots and spinning it back up the hill and all sorts of things.
Yeah, so, and you're like, were you like, well, you're at the bounce or the grind's wrong, Remy? Come on, I mean.
Yeah, you might need a grip on that one. It might help out a bit.
Yeah. Where'd you go from there? Like, where'd you go?
That's it. Yeah, exactly. You can't do anything. But when you do work with him, it's like it's a lesson almost. He'd talk you through what he's doing. It's amazing. Another one, one of my first events. So when I was a product specialist just doing the Vokey thing for UK, I went and helped out at a few tour events. And I took a wedge over Wade Ormsby, and he was hitting shots. It was at Walton Heath, and he was playing it off the fringe. They'd used like a par 3 as the chipping green. And it was playing off it was a real tight lie, slight downhill into the green. And he was hitting this about 20-yard shot, and he was taking a full swing at it, and the ball's coming out really low and fizzing. And he must have been spinning it back 6 foot. And this is like my first event on tour, and I was standing there thinking, I'm out of my depth here. This is too much. Yeah. Like, how did they do that? In the end, a few of the players got their phones out and started filming and doing it. So I realised it was something pretty special to see.
Yeah.
But some of the shots you see the players hit, it really makes you realise how good they actually are.
Yeah, I think that was a big thing for me. You know, when I was working over in Dubai, we used to see a lot of tour players coming through, and a bit of an aside away from wedges now, but just watching and listening to the sound of them hitting golf shots, kind of, for yourself as a coach or as a fitter, kind of gives you a new benchmark, doesn't it?
It does.
When you're working with like elite amateurs, they can hit it incredibly well. But if your benchmark, because you've worked with a tour player, is that little bit higher, it almost gives you a little bit more validity, because you can then almost challenge good players to raise the bar even higher again. It gives you a new, I hate to use the phrase new normal, but it gives you certainly a new benchmark to kind of work and compare against, because that can help you on many different levels, can't it? It can help you to motivate players who want to get to that.
Yeah.
And also, when you are confronted with another tour player who's maybe not quite happy, you've got a new level, having worked with Brett or having worked with a really good short game player. You know where good is.
Yeah.
They take solace in that as well sometimes.
So, for an example, how good these guys are, doing a bit of work with Rafa, he always likes to test his new wedges when he gets them. So we did the test when he got SM8 in Abu Dhabi, and he was hitting shots inside 125 yards and calling the yardage before he hit it. And 1 in 3, he was hitting it on the number he must have hit 15 shots. It's incredible. That's how good they are. And the ones he was missing by a yard or 2 either way. So when you're out there practicing, they're the kind of numbers that the guys on tour are going to. So if you put a basket out there and see how far away your golf balls are, if you hit 15 shots from 80 yards, they're hitting that number a lot of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant.
They are good.
Brilliant. I think on that note, it's a good time to finish up. So, guys, I'm sorry I haven't got through all of the questions, but I think that's a good point to kind of finish with there. Will, can I thank you for everything, and thank you for your time this evening. It's been great to get the stories from tour and a little bit more about the SM8 wedges and all the rest of it.
It's been a pleasure. Cheers.
Thanks for everything you've done this evening, and thanks for all the help you've given me personally. It's been a pleasure to get to know you and learn from you. So thanks everyone for watching. I'll post this up on my Instagram as well, so people who maybe missed the beginning part of it can rewatch it later as well. So, Will, stay safe.
Thanks, John.
Thanks for all your time.
Cheers, guys. See you later.
Cheers now. Bye-bye.